This time we have properties of exponents and scientific notation. For number 1, simplify the following using properties of exponents. Make sure the final answer has no negative exponents, which is a common requirement whenever you're dealing with these exponents. So once again, there are multiple ways that you could approach this. One way to start it is to go through and use the parentheses part here. If we have this 2 times this negative 3 here, that is a power to another power. If you have a power to another power, you have to multiply those exponents together. So here we would have x to the negative 6th power, and then we'd still have that times the y to the 2nd power in the numerator, over, and then in the denominator we would still have the x to the 4th times the y to the negative 3rd. Next, one thing that we could do is then get the x's and the y's together. So here, if we have a negative exponent, you can move that from the numerator down to the denominator, or from the denominator up to the numerator, depending on where it's starting. So for instance, this x to the negative 6th power is in the numerator, so we need to move that down to the denominator. So in the denominator, we're going to have that x to the 4th that was already down there, times x to the 6th. And then the y to the 2nd stays on top since it was a positive exponent. And then y to the negative 3rd is going to go in the numerator as a y to the positive 3rd power. So once you move the exponents, once you move it from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top, the exponent is no longer negative. So now what we can do is we have bases that are the same here. We have a y to the 2nd times y to the 3rd, so we'd add those exponents together to get y to the 5th power, over, and then x to the 4th times x to the 6th. So here we get x to the 10th power. And then there's no negative exponents left here, so then that would be your final answer. So make sure that you are double checking if there is another negative exponent at the end. You want to make sure to rewrite that once again. If you need to do a reciprocal to move it down or move it up, make sure that you are doing so. For the next two, we're dealing with scientific notation. So for number 2, convert the following to scientific notation. So remember, whenever you're dealing with scientific notation, you always want to have just one non-zero number in front of the decimal point, and then everything else goes behind. Here we don't have to include all the zeros behind it because 2.31 is the same thing as 2.31000, and we could add in all those zeros and it doesn't change the number at all. But then we'd have times 10, and then to figure out the exponent on that power of 10, we need to figure out how many places we had to move that decimal point here. So here, to get it so that it's between the 2 and the 3, we would have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. And it is going to be a positive exponent here since it is a large number. Whereas for part B, we have a small decimal value. So once again, we need the first number in front of the decimal place to be the first non-zero number, which is the 1. And then we'd have the 0.35, the two values after the 1 after the decimal point, times 10. And then in this case, it's definitely going to be a negative exponent since it's a small number. And to figure out how many places to move it here, if we're between the 1 and the 3, we'd have to move it a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places here. So we'd have 10 to the negative 5th power. So always start from where the decimal point is being placed and move it over until you get to the first decimal point that you had to begin with. For number 3, you're doing the reverse order. This time we have scientific notation that we are converting back to the standard notation, which is what we had in number 2 to begin with. So here in this case we have the 7 7.13. So we have 713. So that would move the decimal point over 2 places so far. So then that means we need a total of 4 zeros behind that. So that way that decimal point has moved a total of 6 places. So here in this case we get 7,130,000. Again, it is a large number since it was a positive exponent. For part B, we have 1.2 times 10 to the negative 4th. So in this case, it's going to be another decimal value. So we'll have our decimal point here. And we have to move the decimal point over to the left 4 places instead of to the right to make it a smaller number. So if we move it 1 place here, then we're in front of that 1. So that means then we're going to have a total of 3 zeros then in front of that 1. So that way the decimal point has moved a total of 4 places to the left there. So we'd have 0.00012 for our value. Make sure, like normal, if you have questions, make sure to ask.